I'm going to be going through a series of exercises found in Liz Koch's book, the Psoas book. If you don't know her work, she is kind of an expert in the Psoas. She's dedicated her career and life to really understanding it and knowing it. She's written some other books and does workshops. And this is a very simple one, and we're going to go through some very simple exercises to help you get in touch with your Psoas. The focus is a little bit more on softening and releasing versus this intense stretch that a lot of times we feel we need in that area. And if you know her work or read her book, I recommend it because it's approaching the Psoas from a very deep emotional place as well. That deeper kind of intense stretching and exercise, it doesn't always benefit that part of us, that idea of how the Psoas is affecting us on that kind of emotional level as well. But also on a physical level, softening it is going to have a little bit more benefit. So we're going to go through a couple things that she does in her book, and there's different ways to approach it, but this is how she shows it and words it. So I just wanted to share that information. As in her book, we're going to use a mat and a little kind of deflated ball. I have a yoga tune-up gorgeous ball that I just deflated, she says, about a fourth of the way. But before we get to that, we're going to go and just do something called constructive rest position. So she mentions in her book that it was coined by somebody named Lulu Swinegard, but it also shows up a lot in Alexander technique. And it's really just a position where we're laying on your back and letting gravity elongate the spine. And that, just doing that is going to soften your psoas. So the floor is good to work on versus doing this on a bed. We do want some more kind of rough, harder surface, but having a mat or a towel is going to be a little bit more forgiving on your bones. So constructive rest position is really just laying down. I recommend putting something under your head, depending on your neck position at the time. If you find you have a lot of forward head, maybe have a little extra towel, but you don't want too much either, because that can affect the alignment. So I'm actually going to do a little less. You don't want to feel like you're going into too much flexion either. Your feet are hip distance apart, and if it feels better, you can have them up on a chair. And then you're just going to lay in this position. Your hands can rest on that psoas area. And if you need a reminder, you can check out my psoas introduction in a different video. But you're just going to lay here for 10-15 minutes, and you're letting gravity do the work for you of elongating your spine. You're going to soften your gaze, so you're not going to stare at the ceiling or the lights, and you're going to tap into your breath and just relax everything. And you want to feel the weight of your body, so sense the weight of your feet and your head and your pelvis and your shoulders. And notice where you maybe have tightness in the spine. And just be aware of it. You don't want to change to be in a different position. You just are where you are. And you'd be surprised that after 10 or 15 minutes, you might notice that you feel a little bit different. If just being in this position brings up any emotions of anxiety or trauma that you might be holding in that psoas, you want to use your sensations in your surroundings. So notice what you hear or smell, maybe what you see if you need to, and try to let that meet what you're feeling on your inside so they become a little bit closer together. And just be gentle with yourself if it's hard to relax your emotions or your body. And then if your fingers aren't there already, you can place them in the front of your pelvis where that psoas is crossing underneath your organs. It's deep in there. We're not actually going to be able to touch it, but letting our fingers help us be aware of that part of our body, that psoas, and maybe we can start to soften it. Imagine it softening back towards the spine with each breath. And it starts to feel like a little hammock. And just continue noticing what can relax. Can you relax more into your bones? Sometimes we'll hold tension in our jaws and our shoulders and our neck. And let this be a moment, like a meditation for you, whatever you need to focus on. Knowing that our body and our emotions are so connected. And you don't have, this is good to practice often, but you don't have to be as focused every time. Even just being in this position, if you're listening to something, or maybe having a conversation even, it's nice to do it really focused on your body, but you want to do it more often, you might need to just get on the floor and be in that position while you're doing something else, and that's okay too. But it's best to do it not first thing in the morning and not the last thing before you go to sleep, because it can stimulate your nervous system and bring up different sensations and emotions. It's best to do something like this before you do another kind of exercise, or maybe after a long day, after you've done a lot with your body, but not right before you go to sleep, but maybe you just got home and you just need to lay on into the constructive rest position. It's still very restorative, even if you aren't able to do it for a long period of time, or you aren't as able to focus as you are. And ideally, you'll feel the right moment where your body maybe has settled, your nervous system has settled, and it's calmed down a little bit. But it's really, again, about in this specific instance, we're focusing on that softening of the psoas. So maybe that, using that sensation as a guide as well. Once you feel maybe it's a little easier to rest in the position, your back isn't fighting it, your ribs are heavy, your stomach is relaxed. Maybe it was tense when you first started, and now it's starting to just relax a little bit. Using those sensations to guide how long you stay here. I'm going to come out of it, so obviously you can do it for longer at your own. Whenever you come out of it, you're going to roll to your side in that fetal position for a moment and rest there for a minute or so. Just being really gentle with yourself. Your body does so much for you. It holds all of your emotions. And just the simplest, gentlest moment can really help relax the nervous system and help reset neural pathways. And when you're ready, push yourself up. And that can be something you do on your own. We can go through some of the other motions, which are nice to do right after. I'm going to adjust my mat a little bit to do this next thing. You could just go right into this next thing too, but we do want to be able to slide the foot on the floor. So I'm going to be closer to the edge of my mat where my foot can slide on the floor. We're going to slide the foot away from the body. And our goal here, so really get in touch with that big pelvic bone. Your goal here is to not let it move at all. So as you're thinking of that softening, that nice, easy, weighted position, and your leg is going to start to slide away. And if you feel the pelvis starting to move, just stop that, maybe soften a little bit more, and maybe it can move a little bit more. You'd be surprised, there's a lot of little shifts that are happening. You might not feel it, So really place your hands on those pelvic bones and just notice any tilting. And as you go to straight, obviously it's going to want to pull on your back a little bit more, but the more you can think of that belly softening back, that psoas softening back, that leg should be able to reach out without your pelvis moving. If it comes all the way down, let it rest into the floor for a second. That is also just a nice release of the psoas. You might not feel a stretch, but it's releasing it, it's lengthening it in a very subtle way that's a little bit better for the nervous system to handle sometimes. And then we're going to slide it back in, and same idea, noticing that it can stay soft. A lot of things will want to tense up on the way in too. So just trying to be super easy and slow and allow that leg to be able to fold in without changing the pelvis. You can stay on that side or switch. Whenever you need more softening, take a nice deep exhale. You can think of that ha sound. Pausing if you need, if you're moving, or if you need a reminder to soften and then move. And then on the way in, just keeping that softness, no tension in your back, not tensing the hip. I'm going to switch sides. You can alternate each time or stay on one side as many as you need. Try not to change the position of the back. Just stay in that constructive rest position. Soften into that once your leg is straight. And all of this just gets easier the more you do it. So maybe it's really hard to relax. Maybe it's hard to sense the psoas at all, and that's totally normal. It's very deep. It's very personal. You don't want to overfeel it. Let your fingers rest on it. The more you can use your own touch for that feedback will help. So doing that a couple times on each side at your own timing. And then moving on from there, we'll use the little ball, and you're going to put it just on the right side of your solar plexus. So that space where your ribs is separating, the base of the ribs is the solar plexus, and just place it on one side so that it kind of elevates you. So you don't want it to be too off to the side that you don't feel like it's giving you any feedback. So a little bit still in the middle of your back, but more towards the right. And then settling into that. And you're just going to move back and forth a little bit, swaying like if you were on water and you were just letting that water move you. So now we're a little bit more in the upper psoas. So the breath is really going to help here because that upper psoas and diaphragm start to have a relationship. So just noticing, you can take long, full, deep breaths. Moving however you feel is easy and wave-like. You can go a little forward and back. Just let the ball be your guide, so you can move circular. You can sway your pelvis and legs even more if that helps you. Imagining the upper psoas softening. And then we're going to move the ball down gradually. So again, just kind of on that right side. Now maybe down towards your low back. Again, finding like a side to side wave-like motions, like the waves of the water would just be coming underneath you. Or you can kind of do a figure 8, feels nice. Relaxing your throat and your jaw. Feeling everything kind of hollowing back, softening back. Softening is the key word, that releasing, softening. Any rigidity that you hold. Circular motions, forward and back motions, diagonal. It's really like an exploration. That's what she works with a lot, is exploring, just getting in touch with it in your own way. And then you can move down a little bit lower under that pelvis. You can play around with like extending your leg out a little bit or opening it. But softening nonetheless, feeling that front of you hollowing into the back of you. And then when you're ready, take the ball away. It's always nice to notice the difference between the two sides. I feel like my right side is so just light. I don't even notice it, to be honest. My left side is kind of talking to me right now. It's a little bit tight. Maybe just noticing the difference is making that happen. So I'm going to move it onto that left side, closer to the solar plexus height, and then find that soft wave-like undulating breath. Working with whatever you feel your emotions are, wherever they are, whatever they need. Or maybe you're just more focused in your body, which if your emotions feel a lot, if it's bringing up anything, go back to the body, go back to your environment. It's totally normal to have a lot of stuck emotion or trauma at that area, and always stop if something's uncomfortable. Breathing into those sticky spots. And whenever you're ready, move the ball lower at your own. Finding a circular, undulating, swaying feeling that works with what you're needing. Sending that breath all the way down into the pelvis, into the pelvic floor. Not too forceful. Sometimes it's easy to start to get carried away because it feels kind of nice, but if you start to notice you're pushing yourself and to make that kind of fluid motion, just hold back a little and go back to really just feeling where the ball is, feeling where your psoas is, and go back to that, even if it feels like less sensation. And then moving down even lower, like you're on the water. Make sure your gaze is soft. I have my eyes closed and I'm visualizing that I'm on a body of water, and it's just, I'm floating on it, and it's helping me soften, it's helping my body relax. Then just releasing that, staying with that as long as you need. Bringing yourself back to that constructive rest position. And I feel lighter on both sides. I don't feel my back tense as much anymore. We're going to go back to, so you can do that on those couple exercises on their own. I'm going to go through most of the ones she has if you just want to combine everything. But if you're not ready for that, if your pelvis wasn't stable on the sliding out one, maybe this next one is a little bit, you're too much, you're not ready. But if you felt like you were able to stabilize the pelvis and slide the leg out, the next thing would be to strengthen it. So you would go again back out, finding that exhale, that releasing of the psoas. if your pelvis was able to stay and not go with your leg, you would keep your leg straight and you would try to lift the leg. Again, notice that it doesn't tilt sideways either, so both sides have equal weight. It doesn't tilt forward or back, and that leg would just start to lift a couple inches off the ground and then back down. That was harder than I thought. I'm going to do it again, but I'm going to exhale, soften into the psoas. Just lift it smaller. We want to keep all the softening we just did. I did about 3, and I think that's good for that side. I'm going to switch and really be true with yourself. Don't try to be ambitious. It's not about that at all. It's really about being with your body where it's at. Each side might be different too. Obviously, they each have their own things going on. So soften. See if you can lift. I'm going to do 3 on this side too. And then slide it in. Definitely something to work up to. Interesting stuff that's going on. Roll back to that fetal position to come up. You can rest there for a couple breaths. And the next thing would be to continue that strengthening sensation. It would be to do that same thing on your hands and knees. So a little harder when you don't have the feedback of the floor. But strong arms, think of the floor being behind you. So imagine the back of your head and the back of your ribs and the back of your pelvis are there. Your arms are going to stay strong and straight. That pelvis is hopefully in a more neutral position after being in that constructive rest position, so we don't have to overcorrect it. Hopefully it's just resting there. And now we have the feedback of the floor giving us that sensation into our hip joint, but we still think soft psoas. Can you still feel where that was, what that felt like? And then you would try, without shifting a ton, to try to slide that leg out. And slide it back in. And so that would be the first thing that you did. If you felt like that was pretty good, you would reach it out. And again, you would try to lift it up and down. And it's nice to not be too slow either, because the psoas has that pendulum quality. So no movement of the pelvis, maybe go, and then she recommends you can go side to side without feeling a lot of movement. So if your pelvis isn't moving, usually that's not a lot of movement in the leg. You'd be surprised. And then bring the leg down and try the other side. So we want that same easy, soft belly psoas feeling. So a lot of times we over cue ourselves in this kind of thing. We say, engage the core, do this or do that. And it's sometimes nice to just go to that feeling of that lightness that we just found, maybe laying on that ball, that feeling of being in water, that inside space. And then as you're moving the leg up and down, it feels like light. So instead of trying to do a butt exercise or a hip exercise or core, move it side to side. Feel that inner pendulum of the psoas. And then slide it in. All right, so those are a little bit more strengthening. Then you can go to kind of a more like stretch or like a release. So we'll grab Another towel, or maybe like the size of like a yoga mat is usually good. I'm gonna use about the size of a mat. And it just depends on how tight your back was or how tight your psoas was. You might want a little bit less. But you're gonna go back to constructive rest position. And you're going to, again, want to be able to slide your feet a little bit. And you're going to put that under your sacrum, under your the back of your pelvis. And then kind of let your pelvis like slightly tilt over it. You don't want to be in a huge back extension. You just want it to kind of rest. There's other ones where you can curl back, but we're going to be a little bit more towards the front of it. And then you're going to take your leg out again to that kind of soft psoas feeling. It'll feel different to have the pelvis elevated. It's definitely putting it a little bit more on stretch now. Then you're going to take that same side arm over your head. You can hang out there if that felt like, again, you might not feel a stretch, you might feel a stretch, but this is definitely putting it a little bit more on stretch. Then you're going to take your leg towards the midline, towards the other leg. And the same thing, you're going to take your arm and your upper body a little bit there. So you're kind of making a little side bend. And that, I do feel a little bit more stretch in that area when I do that. Then you're going to think of your heart, your sternum, kind of like trying to spiral up and around towards that side. Whatever you're feeling, keep feeling that weight into the floor. Not a huge shape that you're making, just that same feeling in the psoas as your guide. And then we'll release that. We'll try the other side. So come back to constructive rest. Slowly slide the leg out. Lift that arm up. Hang out there for a couple breaths. And then that leg is going to cross to the right and go over to the left with your upper body as well, or go over to that same side with your upper body. So you're making a side bend. And then feel like your heart and your eyes kind of go up and around to that side. And then come back to the center, back to constructive rest. You can repeat that if that felt good, or if you're ready, just move the whatever was under your pelvis, the mat or towels. Come back to that constructive rest. Roll to your side to come out of it, and then push up with your arms.